nice living.
Right, it didn't work out that way.
Well, you know, I find it difficult to retire. I wanted to, I'm sorry, I think someone was...
Oh, I was just going to say that the first question wasn't on the microphone, so nobody heard it. So
It wasn't an important question.
So we were just talking about Belize, how John decided to go to Belize, and the idea that it started out as maybe being a retirement sort of place. But that
right. I've dreamed of retiring since I was 16. But retiring is nearly impossible for me. I enjoy fishing and snorkeling, and I thought that's what I want to do with my life. But I moved to Belize, and the first day I'm snorkeling out by the reef, I'm thinking about, you know, we need a boat system up here. We need a boat company. So I started a ferry service, the largest one in Belize. Then I go, you know, everybody should be enjoying this, but people don't bring enough equipment with them. So I started a tourist water sport rental business. Then I started a flying business, and on and on and on, until pretty soon I had 15 businesses, and I was busier than when I first started McAfee. I just cannot retire, no matter how hard I try.
And you found a few girlfriends at the time.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm 68 years old. I deserve something, sure.
Okay. And so one of them decided at some point to take a shot at you, I heard.
Well, you know, I've always wandered close to the edge, and I think I just fell off. And when you fall off the edge, that's just what happens. What can I tell you?
She wasn't a very good shot.
She was a terrible shot. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely a serious result.
All right. Okay. You've written in discussion groups about pharmaceuticals, about developing drugs, maybe psychoactive drugs, performance-enhancing drugs.
Every kind of drug.
What was the purpose of that?
Well, you know, I have a very long history in drugs. I've probably taken more drugs than the entire room here can carry collectively at some point in time. But 30 years ago, I simply stopped. But just like anything else, I enjoy ripping people and making fun. There's this group, and many of you here may even be on it, called Blue Light. If there are some drug aficionados in the room, raise your hands if you know Blue Light. One. And a lady at that. All right, marvelous. So, well, Blue Light is the #1 drug form on the planet, and it's composed of very intelligent, well-educated people, many of them chemists, others are doctors and psychiatrists, and they have this incredible attitude that we should all be taking drugs. Well, I don't particularly want to take drugs, and I had a bet with a friend. What I did is I created, okay, there was this drug, on Blue Light, you remember MPPV10, yes? Sure. The mythical drug that did everything. It made you a sexual god. It made you live forever. It gave you energy that you could go for 50 weeks without sleeping, and you gained weight. And it was just marvelous stuff. But it was fake. It was just a ruse created by a couple of British gentlemen. But no one really believed that it was a ruse. And for years, this was about 12 years ago, that this mythical drug rose up. So I went online, and as a member called Stuffmonger, didn't give my name, I gave the formula for recreating MDPV10 and invited everybody to recreate it themselves. And for 3 months, these highly intelligent people were dicking around with stove ovens and baking soda and kitchen utensils, doing absolutely nothing. And I just had the laugh of my life. Unfortunately, the people who did the work did not. So some things are funny to some and not to others.
Fair enough. So, you obviously thought about a lot of different things down there, and one of the things was quorum sensing. What got you into that whole idea?
You know, I read a lot. You know, I have a very busy mind. If I stay idle, I get in seriously deep trouble. Even if I don't stay idle, I get in trouble. So, and I read about this new thing called quorum sensing, which is the ability that bacteria have to communicate with one another. If you get a deadly staph infection, a flesh-eating virus or flesh-eating bacteria, it doesn't instantly go to work eating your flesh. It keeps really quiet and low-key. Why? If it started doing anything bad, your immune system would notice immediately and kick ass. So it sits very quietly, and it replicates, and it replicates, and it replicates. And when there are 600 trillion of them, then they go, I think we got enough to kick ass ourselves, and then it turns pathogenic. Well, that was a shocking concept to me, that bacteria act like an intelligent organism collectively. Not only do they communicate amongst themselves, but they communicate intraspecies. It was just a fascinating idea. I then discovered that plants that have been around for about 1 trillion years longer than animals, or a billion years, a long time, whatever it is, okay, had developed, since they can't pick up and move when their neighbor gets sick, had developed an extraordinarily sophisticated technique of finding disease. That technique was quorum sensing. I just went crazy, moved to the jungle, started a lab, hired the leading researcher from Florida University, and went to work. Now, was I qualified? Absolutely not. I know nothing about that. However, it was a lot of fun, and the people working for me did know something.
And what was the goal?
Well, my goal was always way beyond the human reach. I wanted to have a systemic approach to removing all disease. Well, of course, that's way beyond capability. What we did develop was a topical product which was magical. You could spray it on any infection of any kind. A couple of days later, it had healed.
Okay.
Marvelous stuff.
So during this time, you had some problems with employees. There was a raid by the government, by the police. Tell me about that. What happened there? How did that happen?
Well, how did it happen? Well, that's a really good question. On the 2nd of May of 2012, I woke up at 6 a.m. and 42 soldiers in riot gear had stormed my property. I was naked, carrying a gun. I saw what was happening. I put my gun down, was thrown up against the wall, handcuffed, made to sit. They let me put some pants on, by the way, to have politeness to the women in the crowd. It's no fun to look at a naked 68-year-old man, I can promise you. So, it kept me handcuffed in the sun for 14 hours, kneeling with my hands behind my back. A very painful thing. I do not recommend it for anyone, even those who are heavy S&M amongst you. It is not fun. So, and then left without any charges. Why? 2 weeks earlier, the local politician, by the way, I lived on the island of San Pedro, which is a marvelous place. All the tourists go there. It's just like America. Speak English. Everybody's white. I moved to the interior, the only white man in a town of 10,000 people. And I moved into the backyard of the most powerful man in Belize. After I'd been there for a year, a representative came and said, why don't you donate $2 million to my patron's campaign, and in return we'll give you all this land and benefits and so on. And I said, no. They raided my property 2 weeks later, came back 2 weeks after that and said, have you changed your mind? And I said, yes, I'm pissed off now. And so I went to the international press, and that was in May of 2012. And for 8 months, I ran an ongoing war with the Belizean government, demanding an apology at the very least, and getting the attention of the world government on the corruption and all the nightmares that were happening. I should have listened to my compatriot Americans and say, stay in San Pedro, fish, surf, and snorkel. I did not.
And then there was the neighbor.
The death of my neighbor, Mr. Fall, who I barely knew. That was a convenient thing for by the way, not to make light of Mr. Fall's death, Belize is one of the most dangerous countries in the world and is called the murder capital of the world by many organizations because the per capita death rate is the highest of any country in the world. I barely knew Mr. Fall. It was a convenient thing for the Belizean government to try to pick me up for questioning because in Belize, you may hold someone for questioning for 60 days with no charges, and you may renew that indefinitely. So I could have been 60 years waiting to be questioned. I chose not to go that route, and I went underground.
Why didn't you try to get a U.S. attorney or someone to help you out?
Well, you're assuming that the legal system in the rest of the world is much like here in the States, where a court order has bite. Let me give you an example. The telephone company in Belize was nationalized 3 years ago by the Belizean government. It was the company had been owned by a gentleman named Lord Ashcroft. Lord Ashcroft went to court. The appeals court said, hey, give it back. The prime minister, instead of giving it back, sent the army into the telephone headquarters and prevented the employees from coming back. There's no law there. I mean, why hire a lawyer? Why pay the lawyer to end up saying, gee, I can't do anything for you? You know, you suffer your losses in life. You know, you take what comes and move on. That's what I did.
So you already had the attention of the international press. You decided to run. Tell me about that. What was the? Did you have an idea of what you were going to do? Did you have a plan, or did you just kind of move out?
Well, I just moved out. I mean, I left. I was planning to leave alone, and one of the women I was living with said, "You're not going without me."
That was Sam.
That was Samantha, a vicious little girl. And so, you know, rather than have Sam and the Army after me, I took her with me. It was a wise choice.
Okay. And at one point you said you even had to hide under a cardboard box to...
Well, you know, ever since I had run afoul of the government back in May, they had been harassing me. You know, I have in the audience today a gentleman named Chad Esley who was with me in Belize at that time who can verify. Every day the Coast Guard would come and park in front of my house. They would send their soldiers out, then they would march up and down in front of my house looking at me very arrogantly and with hostility every single day, just trying to make me become frightened. We simply had a running war. So I was preparing for anything. You know, I had more hiding places around that property and on San Pedro than you could possibly imagine. One of them was, in fact, a hole in the sand that had been covered with plywood, sand packed on top of that, and a little tiny box on top of that where I could put my head. Then on top of that, I'd piled old wood, paint cans, and garbage of every sort. I was there for 24 hours while the police were no more than 5 feet from my head. No one bothered to look under the box.
Interesting. So at some point you decided that you needed to create a diversion yes, please, to get the press to believe that you were headed in one direction when in fact you were headed in another. Do you feel bad about that? Do you have second thoughts about?
No, I don't feel bad about that at all. I mean, I felt my life was in danger, and I am convinced it was. I had every single day written notices to some press somewhere. I had started a blog, and it had devastated the tourist industry in Belize. Tourism accounted for 70% of the Belizean gross national product. It dropped by 50% after I started my blog. They just wanted me out of the way. So, call that paranoid, call it not, I don't care. It's what was actually happening. The diversion tactic. All of the borders had, I was the #1, every single Army officer and soldier and every policeman in the country had my photograph. And there was a bounty. And they had blocked all of the borders. However, the Belizeans, you know, are just very strange people. They tend to hire, for example, a policeman gets $42 a month, US. Now from that he's got to feed his family, send his children to school, pay his rent, and so on. It is not much money. So not the smartest people take those jobs. And I knew another thing, that there's a sort of laziness within the official part of the government, so that when it rained, for example, I have never seen a checkpoint operating in the rain. I'm not going to get wet for $42 a month, and neither are they. So I was following the weather reports, and I saw rain coming in great quantities on a Wednesday morning. I made my plan to leave that day, and on a Tuesday evening, I spread rumors through my friends that I had escaped across the northern border and had been arrested in the Mexican town of Union. Well, Union has no telephones, and I knew that could not be verified for at least 2 days. And believe it or not, the Coast Guard and everybody abandoned the southern borders, ran to the northern borders, and I just waltzed across the southern border with a retinue of employees and young girls. Now, how difficult was that?
So, I'm going to skip ahead, but one of the things that I want to finalize this chapter with is the net result of all of that from a U.S. point of view, from a press point of view, from what people were reading in the newspapers and seeing on TV, was John has gone off the deep end. John is doing all these deceptive things. John has all these girlfriends. John's been dabbling in drugs. We don't know who this guy is anymore. Do you sort of feel bad about how much your persona changed through that experience?
Well, that was my persona as viewed through the press and as those who read the press and believe it. The press is notoriously inaccurate. Now, may I do a demonstration for you? May I ask for honesty from you folks for just 2 minutes? Okay, can I stand up?
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, I'd like to see a raising of hands for those of you who have at any time in your life been divorced. Now, leave your hands up for just a moment. Okay. Now, of those of you who have been divorced, at any time, were you unfaithful to your ex-wife or husband? Leave your hand up if it was. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Anybody else? Some of you put your hands down after you kept them up. Okay, well, at least 8 people. Well, that's a pretty fair thing. Let me ask another question. How many of you people are currently married? Raising hands. How many of you have actually been unfaithful to your current husband or wife? Nobody. Nobody. Do you see the statistical impossibility of these two cycles? Now, okay, what is the difference? One is, I'm asking you about something that's current, something happening today. Now, what happened 5 years ago? You got your hand up, you're hoping the camera will go on, you go, yeah, bitch, see. But now, no, you're currently married wife, please do not put the camera on me, and my hand never went up. Here's the point I'm trying to make. The press is consistently concerned with what's happening now, not what happened 5 years ago when you were happy to tell the truth. And it's not just with things that you're trying to conceal. I mean, it is human nature. If you work downtown and there was a robbery next door to your work, and the policeman happens by and says, where were you today? You're going to try to find some reason to explain why you could not have done this. This is just human nature. And so the press is now saying, what about now and here? And trying to find truth. Well, good luck. So what it says is no interest in.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about the technology industry, where you have evolved from since the days of McAfee Associates. First of all, McAfee, you sort of stumbled into that. You told me in an earlier conversation that your brother-in-law handed you a newspaper with an article about the first antivirus, or viruses out there, and you found that interesting, correct? Tell me a little more about it.
Well, it was just like anything else that happens in life, it's opportunistic. My brother-in-law was reading a newspaper about a virus called the Pakistani brain. It was the world's first virus built by, or created by a couple of very clever brothers in Lahore, Pakistan, back in 1987, I think it was. I'd never heard of a computer virus, and up to that point, I think neither had anyone else, not even conceived of one. I was reading it thinking, what the heck is this? And then it came to me, oh, I know what they did. They got some code that really replicates itself. Cool. And as soon as I got that, I got, you know what, that's easy to fix. Cool. And I wrote a little program, and that was the beginning of McAfee.
And you only ran McAfee for like 4 years, right?
You bet.
Why did you decide to leave?
I ran it for 4 years, which is 3 years too long. You know, I think I enjoy creativity, and I enjoy very small teams, and I enjoy the process of creating and building. I do not enjoy the process of static running of anything. So I left after 4 years because I was no longer enjoying myself. I love what I do, no matter what it is I'm doing. When I stop loving it, I stop doing it. I hired, by the way, one of the best managers I think the world has ever seen, a gentleman named Bill Larson, who was the executive VP of IBM at the time, and he had 28 consecutive quarters of double-digit growth until he started stuffing the channel. People get greedy. Greed, that's the worst thing you can ever succumb to, folks. But anyway, he got greedy after 28 quarters. The company was fined by the SEC, but still, he hung on for a while.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you started several other companies here in the Valley as well.
Not actually here in the Valley. I said, well, let's see, Tribal Voice. I immediately started Tribal Voice with a gentleman named Jim Zaromsky and a couple of friends, and we ran that for, well, I don't know, about 14 months, and then sold it to CMGI for $17 million. I got involved in Zone Labs really early on, but it had a valuation of about $4 million, and we sold it a year later for $400 million to Checkpoint, I think it was. And other small ventures. I just have to do things. I can't sit idle.
There were press reports at one point that your net value was estimated around $100 million. Was that accurate?
I have no clue.
No clue. Did you invest in other companies here in the Valley?
Not often, no.
Okay, all right. And so, at some point, all of that money sort of dwindled by press reports. There's one estimate that said that at your lowest point, your net worth was down to about $4 million. That may have been due to the recession and so forth. Is that accurate?
Again, I really have no clue. People ask me how much money, if someone wandered up to you in the street and said, how much money do you have and what are you worth? Would you be thrilled or offended, or what would you feel? You know, most people would be offended, and I'm like most people. Excuse me, I'm looking at the door. You know, I'm very much like most people, and really, it's nobody's business. So the numbers that I throw out are the numbers that I just randomly feel like throwing out. If the number 4 looks good today, I'll say I'm worth $4 million. You know? If the number 44 was the first two numbers of the lottery winner yesterday, I'll say, well, 44 million. You know? It's meaningless. Believe nothing I say when it comes to my worth. You know? It is no one's business but mine.
Okay. And just, I think, probably to maybe further riff on that point, you've got all those businesses that you talked about earlier down in Belize, and they're still going on down there, right? And you've given them to your friends, is that correct?
Well, I actually gave them to the Belizean people. I hired no Americans to run any of my companies. They're all local Belizeans. They ran it. They kept all of the profits. They distributed as they wished, and I left it to them.
All right, okay. So now you're back in the U.S. You're living in Portland with your new wife, Janice Dyson, who's here, over here. Thank you.
Stand up, Janice, please. It's my new wife.
I also wanted to notice Chad. Is he here in the audience?
Hard to say. You know, Chad, he's got such a low profile.
There he is,
Even
over there.
sitting next to me, I sometimes don't see him. But
Chad Esley is a Portland area cartoonist, artist.
And technologist.
Yeah.
And there's not enough work in either technology or cartooning for one man. So, you know, he's doing both.
And you've done a lot of work with him
Yes.
over the years. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Maybe let's go into that a little bit. You started a graphic novel with Chad, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, Chad, this even before anything happened, you know, Chad and I were on a private message board together, and had been for a while, and you know, we had communicated, and he suggested coming down to Belize and sort of doing a story of my life and things that were happening down there. He came down, spent quite a while, met everyone of interest, and then when I came back to the States, I decided to go up to Portland and motivate him to finish the thing.
And so while you were, I think in Guatemala even, there were a couple of different people trying to get you to sign contracts for doing movies and so forth.
You bet.
Where does that stand now?
You see, Warner Brothers just announced they had hired the screen artist for their movie on my life, and I think that's based on Josh Davis's book, not one of my favorite people. Josh has done nothing but write about me for years, and it's sort of tragic in my mind. But in any case, the other one is by Future Impact Media in Montreal, Canada. Their screenplay is already finished, and I think it's a really spectacular project. That will be coming out in about a year. There's also a feature-length documentary that the BBC is doing, which unfortunately I had to sit still for about 14 days to, you know, while they interviewed me. But that's all over, and that should be coming out in March of next year.
Okay, and the one in Montreal, you're actually participating in?
I'm helping them because they're nice people.
Okay.
The French Canadians, they're real people. I like that. Warner Brothers, I won't even talk to them.
So is this after these are all done, is that the end of the entertainment industry for you?
God, I hope so. It's not a very fun field.
All right.
A lot of work. You don't see it when you watch a movie. There's a lot of work behind it.
Fair enough.
Much more than I'm willing to do again.
So you obviously have never been able to retire, and you've got new ventures coming up.
I do.
Can we talk a little about your new ventures?
Sure. My latest is back in technology, which I really can't seem to escape. A company called Future Tense. Our first product is a product called D-Central. I think we have, did Francois put our website together? I'm not sure. We have a website which doesn't say much. It's a sort of little teaser called, I think, futuretensecentral.com. But the product, you know, I've been thinking about this product for years. I can't get out of security, and for some reason it's part of my brain, part of my thinking. And we don't have much anymore. I mean, certainly not in the online world. The NSA helped create every single encryption algorithm that we use, and therefore can get access to whatever they want. They have the power and the muscle to coerce companies even like Google to say, give it up, or telephone companies, who is calling who and when. And that's not the worst of it. The hackers of the world, which have enormous power, can get access to anything that they want. I'm 68 years old, and if you can just give me you know, any small amount of information about yourself, I promise you within 3 days, I can turn on the camera on your computer at home and watch you do whatever you're doing, provided you're still connected to the net. Well, if I can do it, any idiot can do it. We live in a very insecure world with a very insecure communication platform. So I've been working again for years, very slowly, and for the past few months, very rapidly, on a solution. And it does not involve replacing the internet. I'm not that much of a fool. But it does involve another layer, and it's a lower layer. And it's a localized, dynamic network where every local network is in constant flux. Let's say you have a little device which we've created, and you drop it in your pocket or your backpack or your shoe or whatever you want and carry it around with you. There are two options. It runs in two modes. You can create a private network so that you and all of your close friends that live in your local area can communicate and they know who you are. It also has a public aspect, in which case you drop all the files and information in there that you as a good citizen might wish to share with anybody. I don't know, the latest MP3 that you have, which you really like and you would like to share. Picture of some girl you think is cute, you don't really care what. You drop it in that public area. Now, it has no screen. It's just a little round little thing that drops wherever you want it, and it communicates with your iPhone, with your Android, with your tablet, with your laptop. We don't care which. We have apps for each of these. And in the morning, you wake up and you open your app and say, you know, I'm really interested in hearing the latest thing from whatever, techno music or rap or whatever you have an interest in, and you list off the things you might like, and then you forget about it. You go outside, and the device is localized. It has a range of about 3 blocks in the city and a quarter of a mile in the country. And so everyone within 3 blocks is communicating with everyone else within 3 blocks. But keep in mind, everybody's in a different location, so everybody's local network is completely unique to themselves. And it changes as you move, or as people move in and out of your local area. Now, so you've asked for a specific file. If you're on a college campus, you'll probably get responses within, you know, a quarter of a second. If you're, you know, out on the road somewhere in a very, you know, sparse area, it may take you minutes or hours to get a response. But you don't even know who is responding. You're walking by, the devices are communicating with one another, and one of them says, oh, you want that file, well, here it is. It doesn't even ask who you are. It doesn't know who you are. There is no unique identifier to your device that is constant. Every few minutes it changes its identification. It is impossible to even know where it came from or who it went to. When you're on your private network, there's a name attached or an ID. But even then, everything is encrypted as with the public network. Since the networks are invisible to each other and in constant flux, there is simply no way to tell who is doing what, when, or where. We have, and this is the very basic level. We of course have other levels. We do have nodes. In every city there will be 3 or 4 nodes that will connect to the internet. But the internet, let's say you're communicating with someone in Denver, the only visible part will be the encrypted communication between San Jose and Denver. When it reaches Denver, it goes into the void again. You know, the 100,000 users in Denver, no clue where it went. Basically, this is it. Does that help?
It does.
Perfect.
All right. So the product is decentral.
Yes.
Is there? It's an app, right? It's
a piece of hardware and an app. Yes.
Okay. And it's Android. It's
Android, iPhone.
Okay.
PC.
All right. And what's the stage of development right now?
We have the design in place. We're looking for partners for development of the hardware. And we have 3 or 4 options for the hardware. And we will actually have 3 or 4 different varieties of the hardware for you know, what power do you want, how large do you want your network to be, and so on. I would say we are 6 months out from our first prototype.
Okay. And
We actually have a countdown, I think, on our website. Do we not? So apparently we do have a schedule.
so what is your business model for this? How do you monetize it?
Like you monetize anything, you build it and someone will come. I mean, I cannot imagine any college student in the world not standing in line to buy one of these. That's at least one market. I believe that everyone will eventually want one. Anybody who's concerned about privacy, anyone who's concerned about security.
So
The NSA will not get into it. The encryption that we have developed is unique, and the NSA or nor any other governmental agency has been involved.
So this is essentially a dark web, right? A localized dark web. Do you have...
But it connects up by relays to every other localized dark web that has one of our devices.
As long as it's in the open mode.
As long as it's in the open, of course. In the private mode, no, the private mode is invisible to everybody.
And do you have concerns about this being used for nefarious purposes?
It will, of course, be used for nefarious purposes, just like the telephone is used for nefarious purposes. I mean, anything that we create will be used for, you know, for nefarious purposes.
We heard Nolan Bushnell on the stage yesterday saying at one point, we made a mistake at the beginning of this whole thing. We should have encrypted everything. We should have encrypted hard drives. We should have encrypted email from the start. Is this somehow a solution to where we are today?
Well, what we should have done can never be a solution to where we are today. He's absolutely correct. We should have, but we did not. So therefore, I am doing.
Fair enough. And do you anticipate, you talked a little about college students being a market. What other markets do you see? What other uses do you envision?
Well, there are lots of markets. I mean, imagine, for example, I hate traffic. And by the way, being back in Silicon Valley has made me want to go to Silicon Beach across the hill now. The traffic here is horrendous. But when there are traffic accidents or things happening or people rubbernecking, whoa, it comes to a standstill. So you can imagine everybody, not everybody, you know, 1 car out of 10 having one of these devices. If there's an accident 5 miles up ahead, within a quarter second of the first person saying accident, we know exactly where it is, and everybody downstream knows it up to a certain point. We're not going to transmit it for 50 miles, but whatever we decide. And then our software gives you the option. You can get off here and have a beer, or you can take another route. We suggest this one. But at least you know, you don't go around the curve and see 14 miles of bumper-to-bumper traffic ahead of you. And that's one application. My favorite one, and by the way, this is one of many thousands. You know how everybody is curious, and how college kids or teenagers love to be involved, and they love excitement. Okay, we have let's call it an alarm system. All right. And which you will sign up for if you have one of these devices, which means that if you're in a neighborhood, anything that happens within 6 blocks of you, which might be bad, that someone gets burglarized, and that person that gets reported, your telephone will alarm. Go on. You wake up, our app says, burglary at this location, last seen traveling this way. Well, you're in the local area, so you're looking out the window. If enough people have this device, someone's going to see the guy, because it will say red baseball cap and black t-shirt. You see the guy running down the street, you say, heading north on 1st Avenue. Now, the people who first got this alert, at this point in time, will no longer receive it because the person has gone out of their area. They go back to sleep or wait for the next burglary that happens further south. We don't know. Imagine how impossible it would be to escape if enough people, teenagers, yeah, I helped catch this guy last night. How would you possibly escape? At every movement, For 5 blocks around you, everybody's looking for you. People are looking out windows to see you dodge into this building, went into this building. Cool, we're all now watching all around it. This is one of my favorite things, because I want to sign up for it myself. I can't sleep at night sometimes. So there are thousands of applications for this. You know, the automobile, the security. I'm in a fraternity, you know, and we have our secret little meetings and signs and whatever it is. Or I just want to listen to music.
John, I'd like to open up the questioning to the audience now. We have a couple of mics here, one anyway. We have a few minutes left.
Yes, quick question. I live in Florida, but I've happened to invest in some companies in Portland. I wanted to get your thoughts on one company I didn't invest in. They were trying to do a private version of Twitter. The reason I decided not to invest is I figured basically we have secret laws, we have secret interpretations of laws, and the federal government's not going to allow them to have this kind of very private communications network. And I'd like to, because you obviously think a lot about these issues, I'd like to hear your comments on it.
But it's quite possible that the federal government will not allow me to sell this product too. But the federal government is not the world. I mean, if that happens, I will swallow it and I will sell it in England. And if I can't sell it there, I'll sell it in Japan. I'll sell it in China. I'll sell it in Russia. I'll go to the third world. This is coming and it cannot be stopped.
Do you have any thoughts more broadly on how this, let's just call it the nascent police state, how it's going to play out here in the U.S.?
Well, you know, I hope it does not play out like every other nascent police state, which is a total lack of freedom for all of the citizens. Let's hope it doesn't reach that point. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Steve Jobs said that dropping acid was one of the most influential things in his life, next to marrying his wife, where he corrected himself. And I was wondering, since you have so much experience with drugs, I'm sure you came across some mind-altering experiences. How's that affected your brain and your learning?
Well, you know, I would say that psychedelics have been extraordinarily influential in my life and extraordinarily horrific at the same time. You know, I would not advise anyone to drop drugs, and Steve Jobs is one of the fortunate few where acid did in fact end up being positive for him. But for every one of those, there are probably 10 that still think they're Jesus, and this is the problem with psychedelics. Yes, sir.
You talked about, back to your technology, you talked about back to your project.
Yes, sir.
You've talked about the social opportunities, ability to alert other people of information. Something also we're seeing a lot is this peer-to-peer transaction space, like Airbnb and Lyft. I was curious if you see a role for that in what you're building, and also would you see that powered by something like Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency?
You know, we have not addressed that yet. It's a little bit too complex for my feeble brain, but I assure you that some of my people are thinking about it, and that at some point we will certainly see where we could apply ourselves there. Yes, sir.
Two quick things. One is that the device you're talking about, the hardware-software combination, is very intriguing. It sounds like there's a whole movement out now called personal cloud, and it sounds like it's the marketing platform would be accurate to...
Absolutely.
Okay, and then the other one is on a more personal level. I read recently that correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the activities that helped you go from being a drug user to being sober was yoga, and you had done, but you hadn't mentioned that in the conversation so far. Could you talk a little about how that yoga helped? And
Absolutely. I do everything hard and with full heart. You know, if you're going to do something, do it all the way. And if you're going to be an alcoholic, you know, work up to 12 bottles of scotch a day. I mean, otherwise, give it up. If you're going to take drugs, take them all. You know, don't be selective. Say, well, no, I'll take this, but not that. And if you're going to take them, take as much as you can. You know, when you can no longer function, wake up and start over. So I had developed a fairly horrific habit. So I first went to a thing called Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know if there are any other 12-step program people here. It was very helpful. But you can't go to meetings your entire life, and so yoga became a foundation of something else for me. A path into places that Steve Jobs may have gotten through LSD that you can get through other means that aren't quite as potentially destructive. I think that yoga is a marvelous discipline. I recommend it for anyone who wants not just to get away from drugs, but also to get a flexible and healthy life.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
How much will your device cost?
I would like to make it available for free, but it will have to cost something. We don't have the costing data down. It will be less than $100. I can guarantee that.
Just an implementation question. If everyone's anonymous with your device?
If on the public side, yeah. On the private side, you are not anonymous.
Oh, but how do you form groups if there's no identity?
There is no group. That's what I'm
Well,
saying.
you
On the
mentioned
public
teams.
side, there are no groups. The group is just whatever you're floating through. You don't care what it is. When the device collects something from, let's say, the latest song, someone is floating through and has it, they get out of range and you haven't finished getting it. We don't care. Someone else will get in range and give you the rest of it. We don't know who sends it. They don't know who received it.
Oh, well, you mentioned fraternities using it as
Right. But that's the private side. Okay, that's
Okay.
where you actually, half of your device, it knows your name, if you want, or your handle, or whatever you would like about you, and that's how it identifies itself. The other half of the device does not identify anything. Both sides are encrypted.
So it is kind of a public/private mode where you're...
They're constantly in public/private, in which you can shut either one off completely. Okay?
So,
Yes, ma'am.
yes, your life is full of events. Obviously, you enjoy it or you live with it.
Yes.
And the new application you are trying to create is to make in life with so much things. What we are seeing is there are a lot of information, and some information does not have anything to do with us. And I want to know, you or anybody else that is trying to make out something that simplifies, filter the information, and get the things, what we need, what we want. Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not addressing that at the current moment. Perhaps in a later implementation, there will be a demand from our customer base, and it will happen. Is that it? Wonderful. Whoops.
Got a little follow-up to the drug questions. What's your opinion on marijuana?
Okay. Well, should I tell the truth on this? All right. I used to sell drugs, because if you take enough drugs, the only way you can support your habit is to sell to others. So, and for many years I did. By the way, I stopped using all drugs, selling drugs, or accessing drugs a little over 30 years ago. So this is not a recent part of my history. However, I did notice that among my clients, I like the pot users the most because their lives never went anywhere. They remain customers forever. And I hate to burst your bubble, but I'll be frank with you now. If you are a marijuana smoker, I would vastly prefer you switch to heroin, and here's why. Heroin will take you down faster, and you can then pick yourself up and start your life. Because marijuana is the drug of illusion. It creates the illusion that you are thinking great thoughts and doing great things while you are sitting on the sofa growing a beard. Yes, sir.
Hi, I wanted to know your thoughts about quantum cryptography and if your new device will somehow incorporate.
I wish I knew something about that, because I'd say something. We're not using anything that's sophisticated. I am a simple man with a simple mind. I will say that our encryption is not going to be hackable.
Bold statement.
You said you weren't trying to create a new internet, but it sounds like when enough of these devices get out there, you would essentially have a new distributed network that...
Well, yeah, and if you choose to abandon the old internet, that's your business, not mine. I'm not setting out to create a new internet, although my users may do one accidentally.
And are you going to make this open for developers to create apps on?
We will.
And is any of it going to be open source?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Are you going to be reinventing the OSI layers or anything like that? Like, are you doing TCP IP or anything for that?
Well, we are definitely doing our own protocol.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, we might as well abandon the attempt to be secure.
Other questions?
You You guys are too easy. Really. I got no hard questions at all.
Are you getting paid today?
I'm sorry?
Are you getting paid today?
Well, absolutely not. You know, I can't get paid to do anything anymore. I'm sorry? Portland is great. The motto of the city is keep Portland weird, and I'm doing my part.
What kind of yoga do you practice? And
You know,
also, can you talk about the adrenaline you were feeling in Belize when you were fighting before?
Okay. You know, I do all sorts of yoga. I did Iyengar, which is a hatha yoga, which is the physical yoga for many years. I've also done yoga breath work, of course meditation, which is part of every yoga. The adrenaline, well, you know, my life is pretty much full of adrenaline, and in Belize it did reach its max. I did have an entire army of 7,000 soldiers and 4,000 policemen, each with my photograph in their pocket looking for me for 5 weeks. That will weigh some adrenaline.
If a teenager approached you and asked, you know, what you would suggest in charging their life, what kind of advice would you give?
I would tell them to do what they love above all else, and to do it with all of their heart and all of their mind, and to have no fear. I do. Well, I have one legitimate child. I don't do drugs anymore. Well, that's a really tricky one. See, I was more like a chemist with drugs. You know, I had to mix things around. But if I just were to choose one drug, I would say mushrooms. Psilocybin is probably as good as it gets. You know, I don't think I want to promote use of drugs by saying mix this with that and you'll have a magical time.
I have a potential, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just curious, like, you know, because someone who didn't start with tech, I'm always interested in hearing people's story. What got you interested in engineering and coding to begin with?
You know, when I went to school, they didn't have computers. Well, the computers they had filled rooms this size, and they had less of the power than the iPhone you're carrying in your pocket. So I studied mathematics. And I studied mathematics because I was lazy and math came easy to me. I could have done physics, and when I discovered that you had to have just as many math courses to get a math degree, I go, screw it. But programming is mathematics, that's all it is. It's logical thinking. So when computers did come around, out of laziness again, that's what I got into. Yes, sir?
John, do you have any fears left? And what drives you?
Any what?
Fears.
I fear my wife. And I think what drives me is an incessant curiosity that just is insatiable.
I had another question on the same topic. Just now you said have no fear. What was your biggest fear in your life, and how did you get over that?
I would have to say the fear of heights and the fear of flying. And I tried to get over that by becoming a pilot, and I became a fairly good pilot. I chose the worst airplanes, open cockpit sport planes. But I still have the fear of flying. That's not the same type of fear. That's a thing called fright. You know, when you're a mile above the ground and you're looking down and just something rushes through you. That's not the same fear that I'm talking about in recommending something to a 17-year-old. The fear of what might happen. The fear of, if I do this, what would happen if I fail? If I do this, what will people think? These are the fears I say have none of. Yes, sir?
Yeah, you talked a little bit about flying and whatnot, and I actually had heard some rumors about that sort of leading to your fleeing the country and there being some problems with a court case, possibly with the planes, an accident or something.
I've had many hundreds of lawsuits. These are civil suits, by the way. Yes. My nephew was flying one of my airplanes and crashed and killed himself and the passenger. Because I was the owner of the airplane, there was a wrongful death lawsuit filed against myself and 27 other entities. So but I certainly did not flee the country because of that. Yes?
Will you go back to Belize?
You know, no time soon, sir.
Not anytime soon, but if you can rectify your situation.
I'm sorry?
If you could rectify and fix your situation.
But see, there is no situation to rectify, really. I'm not charged with anything. And every reporter who has gone to the Belizean police and asked questions, we say, no, we have no evidence linking him to the crime. We really want to talk to him.
So why not go back?
Because talking to me involves putting me in jail for 60 days minimum, and which is they can continue that forever. It is a renewable 60 days. There is no law in the country, sir. Nothing to rectify it.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.